Hey everybody, this is Qualifiers. As you can tell, I'm not against my normal backdrop today. I'm in the middle of the woods in Rhode Island. I'm living in a cabin right now. So instead of my nice uh, picture of the woods type backdrop, you will get the real woods, and hopefully I'll get some better angles than this one against the window too. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this new record from EMA. I've been listening to EMA since her first solo effort, Past Life Martyred Saints, which came out when I was probably about 17 or 18. And at the time, I was drawn towards the intensity of the album, how confessional it was, yet how mysterious at the same time. EMA has a way of being able to draw her listeners in close and make things sound very personal and intimate, while also being mysterious and symbolic and poetic in a way that leaves people guessing. And this is a really seductive quality. So I was really excited for her next album, The Future's Void, to come out. But when I heard it, it just wasn't sticking with me the same way that Past Life Martyred Saints stuck with me. There were a lot of great things about it. It was a concept album and it aimed big. It dissected a lot of really interesting philosophical issues about the internet and social media and whether technology giving us this lack of privacy is a good thing or a bad thing for society. The songcraft was there. There were a lot of really well written tunes on this album, a lot of really beautifully produced songs. All of the hallmarks of an EMA album were there, but I think what it ended up lacking ultimately was a sense of the personal. Past Life Martyred Saints, as I mentioned before, it felt like EMA's own singular vision. Every song felt animated by EMA's unique personality. And The Future's Void, it felt a little more scattershot. A lot of the time the lyrics were a little too broad, a little too abstract to really connect on that personal level. And the songs varied wildly in sound. There were some that were really beautiful and glossy, some that were really abrasive and noisy, and theoretically this could work, but it just wasn't cohering in the right way. The Future's Void didn't really feel like it had a singular person behind it, and the singularity of EMA's personality and the way she interacts with her listeners has always been at the core of her appeal. So I was a little bit concerned about this next album when I found out that it was going to be a concept album and a politically tinged concept album as well, just because that I was worried that this would bring out the more intellectual, overly complex side of EMA and lead her even farther away from that more simple, more intimate style that attracted me to her so much in the first place. But EMA here, I think, is actually trying to do the opposite of making something really ambitious and complex. Instead, I think she's trying to economize, and I think she's trying to boil stuff down to its bare bones and see how things that seem very unrelated actually share some similar themes, share some similar concepts. Because on the face of it, a lot of the songs on this album are about radically different things and seem like they would not work on the same project. She has a song like Receive Love, which is about her kind of unpacking some of her own personal baggage, thinking back on some memories of people she knew who would make degrading jokes about women and how this may have made her trust men less in her present day relationships. Then she has these mysterious, poetic, almost myth-like songs, like the song 7 Years, which is about a person who has been in this relationship for 7 years and suddenly realizes that they were in this relationship more because of their own insecurities than anything to do with the other person, and they kind of have to go and reckon with themselves. And then she has these other songs which deal with political issues, songs like Aryan Nation, which is about the cycle of disenfranchisement that happens in these small, mostly white Midwestern towns, and how that this can lead people to sympathize with hate groups and want to take things out on other oppressed groups. So you would think that with all of these topics being discussed, this album might just be stuffed full of talking points and unnecessarily complex and just a total mess. But what EMA does to make it all work is she strips these things down to their essential emotional core. So when she's talking about this relationship on 7 years, she's not talking about the details. She's talking about the sense of wanting to break free and needing to reckon with these forces greater than yourself. And likewise, on the song Receive Love, it's not really about these specific memories of men and how they were degrading towards her. It's about her own need to kind of escape her past and wondering when this trauma will stop haunting her. And on the last song, Aryan Nation, it becomes a little bit less about the specific circumstances these people are in and more about the feeling that you need to steal something back for yourself, that you are caught in a cycle that you need to break out of somehow, but you're not sure how to do it. So she takes these three things which seem incredibly separate, and she boils them down to these concepts that come up over and over and over again on this album. And I think because EMA is focusing so much on the underlying themes and concepts, it allows these songs to be really personal in a way that they wouldn't be if she focused more on the specifics of what was actually happening. In fact, it's kind of amazing just how personal everything feels on this album. No matter what roles EMA takes on or what stories she tells, everything that she says feels like it has a personal context for her. This whole album feels like an exorcism of her own personal demons, and most of these songs aren't really even about EMA. There was always something about the beauty of EMA's compositions and the husky and raw but very poised nature of EMA's voice that pulled the listeners in, even when what she was talking about might be a little bit too intense and might be things that you would want to pull away from normally. Something so seductive about her music in that way. On Exile in the Outer Ring, she's still using those powers to make things that are ugly or disturbing into things that are more beautiful and more seductive. But here, she's doing it with a little bit more of a punk edge. There are lyrics on this thing which sound like they could come right out of American Idiot. It's an interesting counterpoint to how these themes are usually presented, which are as something that is supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, ugly truths you are supposed to confront and get angry about. Whereas on this album, the rebelliousness feels a little more muted, but also a little bit more mysterious and a little more open. There's this song on here called I Wanna Destroy, which feels like a pop punk song that could have maybe been from the Ramones or something, that was just sort of taken apart and reassembled as something stranger and more ethereal. There are these really bright guitars on this song against this really rhythmic tambourine, and EMA's voice over it is so echoey and reverb-filled, but also kind of half-whispering and intimate, that draws you into this sentiment of wanting to destroy things rather than repelling you or confronting you or making you feel angry. Even though this album deals with a lot of intense feelings of hatred and rebellion and anger and wanting to nihilistically just smash the system and destroy everything, there's also this really poignant through line about needing other people or wanting to need other people. All of the characters on this album, from EMA herself when she's deciding whether or not she can trust her partners, to the woman on Breathalyzer who's having this almost religious hallucinogenic experience in the back of this guy's car, to the people drawn towards the alt-right and Aryan Nation, they're all looking for something to believe in, and they're trying to figure out whether that thing that they need to believe in could be other people. A really good example of EMA balancing these emotions of needing independence and also needing other people is on the song Down and Out, which I think is one of the best songs she's ever written. It starts with this tight little groove of this violin and this guitar interplay matched with this percussion instrument, I'm not sure what it is. And over this very tight, churning melody, EMA's voice starts singing about how you need to be confident in yourself and you shouldn't feel worthless or bad about yourself when you're in times of financial need, when you're down and out. But as the song progresses, this kind of worry or tension starts to seep into it. There's this little wheedly, staticky noise on top of the mix that almost sounds like it's needling or bothering the groove. But at the same time, the groove keeps going on like it's something you can dance to. It's very tense but very upbeat at the same time. And as that tension starts mounting in the song, EMA herself starts getting more vulnerable, and this note of desperation creeps into her voice, like she's maybe experiencing some of the desperation people might feel in kind of like a dire poverty. And as the song goes on, she starts cajoling the audience to not go away, to not leave, that there's more for her to say. And overall, the song is just very tight, and the movement through it is subtle yet very powerful. I have been praising this album a lot because I think it aims big and it accomplishes most of what it aims to do. But there are a few ways I feel like it could have been improved. The song Always Bleeds is a really beautiful song, but I don't know what it's about, to the point where I don't think it fits in with the rest of the album, because if the themes are there that connect it to the other songs, I'm not seeing them. It sort of feels like a fragment of memory, or like a fragment of someone else's dream that I can tell was emotionally resonant for them, but I'm not exactly sure why. Listening to this song, I don't even really know what emotion I'm supposed to get from it. I also feel like this particular song, Always Bleeds, while it is very beautiful, it sounds very good to my ears, its structure kind of leaves something to be desired. Like, it starts out with this really catchy, sticky guitar riff, which you think is going to lead into some kind of satisfying chorus or groove, but it doesn't really do that. It kind of fades off into what sounds like just a really nice soundscape. This almost feels like it would be the live version of the track, where they let themselves get a little more indulgent, and that the studio cut would be a little bit tighter than it is on the actual album. There's also the song Blood and Chalk, which I just feel like is a little bit EMA by the numbers. The imagery here is really shocking, is really visceral, is kind of poetic. It's about, as far as I can tell, it's about this character who feels like other people don't understand her, and she wants to scrape herself down until she's just blood and chalk, so people will sort of see. There's another song on here called Blood and Chalk, which seems a little basic to me, a little bit like EMA by the numbers. It basically lives and dies off of the melody, which is really catchy, really beautiful, and this one striking image of this character who feels like other people don't understand them, don't see what's inside of them, and wants to just scrape themselves down until they're just blood and chalk, as they say. And this could be a reference to self-harm, I'm not really sure. Like a lot of the things on this album, it's more about the abstract idea behind it than the reality of the situation, than the specifics. But I feel like the song leans a little too heavily on this one image. We don't learn much else about this character, and the song doesn't really grow or develop or change over its runtime. It just kind of gives us a verse, a chorus, a verse, a little bit of a bridge, and then fades away. While the instrumentation does get very intense towards the midpoint of this song, and makes kind of a nice climax, compositionally, there isn't much that really interests me, and writing-wise, there isn't really much that interests me in this song. I don't know, maybe it's just that I feel like EMA approached these themes better on her first album, Past Life Murdered Saints, which did talk a lot about self-harm. I don't know, this song just really isn't doing much for me. But overall, I think this album is really good. Really interesting, really complex, really rewarding. It does lose a little steam in the second half. There are some songs on the back end of this thing that feel a little overlong and not as attentive to being tight and compelling, good standalone tracks as some of the highlights off the first half of the album. But overall, I still think that the ideas in here are good enough, are interesting enough to make this worth a listen.